Live from the Washington, D.C. area, all empowered citizens need to know about intelligent use of resources, smart governance, inclusive communities, smart industry, and healthy, thriving urbanization. This is Smart Sustainability, the TV talk about shaping a sustainable future in the digital age with Nicolette DeVidar. Now I want to switch to the UK, where civil unrest can easily turn into civil war. Illegal immigration is a huge problem that societies cannot look away from anymore. Europe can't breathe anymore. So let's go to England and see firsthand what's going on. The murder of 3 children by an in England-born child of immigrants that has taken the lid of a society that is overwhelmed and grieving, a society that overlooked what the government, Conservative and Labour Party, they both have been doing to British towns, communities, and its culture. Now, mainstream media all say it's the far-right mob that's rioting, but I spoke with people who are not at all far-right. They're ordinary citizens, concerned parents. In fact, many of them have focused on inclusion efforts beyond what most people do about this all their lives. But even they say enough is enough. And while people are afraid to speak out because apparently the government has arrested and is arresting anyone who looks critically at government policies about migration, there are plenty of input we could get. David Atherton, you're in London right now. When looking at the footage that's coming out of England, it looks like England has disappeared. Where's England?
Nowhere at the moment. There's a lot of very disgruntled people in this country at the moment. What it basically boils down to is that for 27 years, the governments, both the Labour and the Conservative parties, have promised low, zero immigration in the tens of thousands, and they've lied through their teeth. 3 separate occasions, in 2010, 2015, 2019, they were promising, as I say, immigration in the tens of thousands. There's also 100,000 people coming across the English Channel from France to England at the moment, and they cost a fortune. Probably exactly the same as illegal immigrants crossing the Texas border at the moment, and they cost a fortune to on housing, feeding them, clothing them, sending them to school and health service and what have we. And of course, they're overrepresented in crime. For example, to give an example, there's a town on the south coast of England called Bournemouth. And it's a bit of a seaside resort, so it's got loads of hotels and things like that. And so someone put in an FOI request, freedom of information request, for the number of rapes in the town in the last 20 years. And since they've started accepting migrants from the Channel, there's been a 4-fold increase in rape in the town. Some of that you could put down to women feel a little bit more confident reporting the offence to the police, but a lot of that is cultural. And also as well, property in this country is very scarce. We're an island about the size of New York State, and we have 80 million people living here now. Housing is extraordinarily expensive. Where I live is a nice. It's considered to be a nice area. A small two-bedroomed house where I live will set you back somewhere in the region of $1.5 million. So, $1.5 million. So, it's a very expensive place to live. And if we're talking about maybe a 4 or 5 bedroom detached house, it's probably something in the region of around 10-20 million pounds, to $10-20 million to buy around here. The average rent in an average area in this country is about $1,300 a month. That's for a 1-bedroom or a studio. So it's high. And this has been pushed up by immigration, and plus you have the crime with it. And people have been saying we don't want any more immigrants coming to this country. and because we're basically been blocked and ignored and what have we. Even if we've always voted for parties that wanted to lower immigration, and people are very, very angry at the moment. They're young people who just can't afford to rent a place or buy a place, and still own their parents at the age of 30. And so, what was a trigger for all the problems and the riots that we've had in this country was a guy who. He's second generation. He was actually born in Cardiff in Wales, but his parents had come from Rwanda, and we don't know why. There's no motivation, and he just jumped in a taxi, went from his home to this kindergarten. Where I say kindergarten, it was a school for girls during the holiday. It was a Taylor Swift themed dance and yoga class that they were doing there. He just wandered in and stabbed all the little girls left, right, and centre. Two of the teachers tried to get involved; they were stabbed as well. And the net result was 3 girls aged between 7 and 10 were murdered. And some of the others have got out of hospital now, but I believe the adults are still in a very serious condition at the moment. So we pray that they come through. And that was it. The people in this country have snapped. And the cost of keeping migrants in hotels is something like £8 million a day. So that's about what? That's probably about $12-13 million a day. And it works out about something like 5 billion, if more than that now. I think it's now $10 billion a year it costs the taxpayer to keep these people in 3 meals a day, and transport here, transport there, and they complain about the Wi-Fi. And by the way, let me also say that a lot of these people, when what they do is, when they're in the dinghy coming over from France to England, they tear up all their passports and documentation, and they throw their phone into the sea. So there's no way we can identify them, and you guarantee there's going to be some ISIS terrorists amongst them or Al Qaeda terrorists amongst them. So people in this country say, it was a bridge too far. People have snapped, and today there is thought to be something like 38 protests up and down the country. And also,
I read 100. I read actually that the police was preparing for 100. Hang on a second, because you said they were overrepresented in crime. Do we know the stats? What are the stats?
Right. Okay. There was that example there that of 4 times the increase in rape in a town in Bournemouth where migrants are settled. Although again, these might be second generation or third generation migrants. There was a paper put together by some academics 3 years ago, whereby they downloaded all the names of the people that had been convicted of rape, and 83% were Pakistani heritage Muslim men. There's a lady member of Parliament called Sarah Champion. She's the MP for Rotherham. Rotherham is a small town of about 200,000 people, and over a period of 20 years, at least 1,400 girls aged between 11 and 15 were raped by Pakistani heritage Muslims.
Why do you think actually there is an overrepresentation of crime to begin with, when many of them, when they come over, I mean, I know in Europe, I know, for example, in Germany, a lot of them get a lot of handouts from the government, a lot of help. So why is there still, do you think, or what you call an overrepresentation in crime? Or generally, why is there crime?
Sure, okay. Well, there's a number of different reasons. The German Federal Education Ministry did some research into the people that come in from the Middle East and Sub-Saharan Africa, and I found that 68% were functionally illiterate. They couldn't read and writing Arabic or Persian or whatever language they came on. They had about the learning level of about 11, 12-year-old, and that's in their own language. The Germans also did an apprenticeship course to bring them up to 16, 17-year-old standards of German. 2-year course, there was 70% dropout rate. In Scania, the truck maker manufacturer in Sweden, they took on 100 migrants, and within 3 months, 90 had quit or been fired because they couldn't turn up for work on time, couldn't work as part of a team, or take instructions from women. Many of them have been brought up in fundamentalist Islamic countries, whereby they are taught that women are second-class citizens. They have this sort of kind of superior inferior complex. They're told that because they're Islamic and they are superior. But when they sort of get here and they see how relatively wealthy we are and how relaxed we are, they kind of have this inferiority complex. It's
many. I mean, you saw that actually in Lampedusa, that out of those 7,000 refugees that were coming over, actually the bulk of them were young male. They were not. There were no women or children. They were young male.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure,
you
exactly.
did see that. You did see that. There definitely is an overproportion of young males that is coming over versus actual families and children. That is noticeable. Now, I want to get back to also what you said. You said that really what brought also the whole situation to a boiling point was that there are a lot of economic necessities, so to speak, in Britain that are no longer achievable for most Britain, it sounds like.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
like rent, etc. So that seems to me that's failed politics, not necessarily going on towards the overpopulation. So shouldn't we start with the failed politics?
Well, this is the whole point about the British political system. Again, it mirrors with it mirrors with America as well. I don't know whether you're Republican oriented, but the way I look at Washington as a political entity, you have the swamp, and the only person who's really, one of the person who's really challenges the swamp is Donald Trump. Then there might be a couple of others, sort of congressmen like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz and people like that. But same with Britain. The equivalent of Trump over here trying to drain the swamp is Nigel Farage. He's the only person who tells us how it is, and he's routinely smeared and denounced as a racist and he's a far right person. This week he's been touring the studios denying he was the inspiration for the riots. When we all know it's the completely failed immigration system of the Conservative and Labour Party for the last 27 years. It's a major fail on the politics side at the moment. We have the Union Party over here.
I think it's also failed economic policies. It's not just the failed migration policies. I think that the bulk of it, a lot of the discontentment goes much, much further back, and that's a failed economic approach. No.
Sure, you could give government to a certain extent the benefit of the doubt, with the COVID pandemic. But of course, but again, there's I'm a classical liberal economically, and I want to see a minimum state and minimum government spending. And there's this mindset certainly within the British establishment, that the high taxes are good, high spending is good. Believe you me, I can spend my money far more better than the government can. You got a bloated civil service, you've got overreach. Often, somebody in the civil service doesn't judge his skills or his department by what it's done, but it's how many people they manage. They'll sort of stuff their people, with use as employers. Barris Thatcher, said that only half the civil service worked. The other half were bone idle, useless, and lazy, and should be fired. But she never unfortunately got around to sorting those people out. But yeah, it's the Union Party. You look at the manifestos. The differences between the Conservative and the Labour Party in Britain at the last general election, which is barely 5 weeks ago. There was very little to choose from. You get a cigarette paper between them, just about get a cigarette paper between them. So yeah, people are hugely disillusioned with the political system in this country.
Back to with the riots right now, what reports actually on mainstream media across the West about what's happening there, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And when it is reported, the general narrative, usually all that we hear is that this has begun from the quote far right mob.
Sure.
Is it a far right mob that started that, or is this narrative in terms of who really, where is there a far right that comes in, or is there a crossover?
First of all, when it comes to sort of far right Nazi parties in this country, there are some, but they have very, very few members. The far right is more of a smear than it is an accurate description of what's going on. For example, 9 out of 10 constituencies in Britain would like to see immigration reduce. So you're saying 90% of people in this country, are far right. Basically, it's a smear used by the left to describe anybody who does not believe in the mantra of mass immigration and what our borders controlled. It's horrible. And moving on from that, and there were yobs, who were at these demonstrations, and the behaviour was terrible. They was disgusting. They were vandalising and setting fire to places. And they deserve every single month and year in prison they get. But that was not a representative of what was going on. There was a kind of a meme going around on X, whereby people say, people say I'm a right wing thug, and it was people across all classes, all races, all ethnicities, but we're all united in wanting to have less immigration. So to sum it up, the far right is a misnomer. Yes, there are yobs and there are thugs, who are involved in this, but the vast majority of people are just normal, decent human beings who just want to be listened, want their fears listened to by a deaf government.
Yeah, because I did speak to a number of people from all different backgrounds and from also all different faith groups, and none of them were anywhere near what I would classify as the far right. They were normal citizens. In fact, many of them involved in inclusion efforts, in actually broadening society, etc. But there is a point where people just say it does hit a boiling point, but the government doesn't seem to see that. What is the government actually doing?
Well, nothing. In fact, the Labour Party will be making itself even more unpopular. The Conservative Party had stopped. They were going to stop people being given work visas who earned less than $50,000 a year, or actually might be $45,000 a year. I'm going to do this all in my head as we go through at 1.3. But Labour scrapped that. Last year, we have a population, say, of probably about 75 million, I reckon, in this country, and we're taking in 1 million new people a year. Every single year for the last 5 years, we've taken in net 1 million people a year. Some might be Chinese from Hong Kong, some might be Ukrainians, but we are still giving out work permits, like sweeties, and so it's completely unsustainable. And also, well, the thing, what the Labour Party has done, is equivalent of lighting the blue touch paper and standing back, is that rather than put them in hostels and hotels and spare public land, what they're going to do is they're going to buy up new builds, and the social housing, the welfare housing that the supplies will go to them rather than the indigenous population. And that's going to be a tinderbox. That's really going to wind people up. There is no end to the problems that the Labour Party is making for itself. There is no will in this country to stop immigration, which is the most. It's like Biden. There is no will. There's no will for the Biden administration to stop it. Now, they could have stopped the immigration across the Mexican border at any time they wanted to, but they just chose not to. Just presumably to, if Trump does get in, make his life extremely difficult. Maybe they're looking to import a new electorate. As many of the African Americans and Hispanics are now voting for the Republican Party. Maybe it's his new electorate. But just like Britain as well, is they're stoking up years and years of trouble for themselves. And there's even as Elon Musk noted the other day, Britain at some time could be on the verge of a civil war. We have a low-level one at the moment, but it could end up being, even more serious. I'm just going to try to choose my words very carefully here. But suffice to say, people in this country are extremely annoyed.
22, where people who really are normally even more on the liberal side actually have reached a point where they say this is no longer acceptable because we have too many knife stabbings, we have too many rapes, we have too many things, and they're always put under the table. Now I want to ask you about something else here though. When we hear a lot about hate speech, right?
Yeah.
But yet when the government calls its own people, white British citizens or any type of British citizens, thugs, whenever they speak up, is that not hate speech?
It's all right. It's all right when the left do it. When the right do it. That's obviously we should be chastised for it. So I think the problem as well that the Labour government has made a rod for their back for us. Despite all the name calling they're doing, they're also going after people on social media at the moment. They obviously have a unit that has made TikTok and Facebook and YouTube closed down accounts who the state disapproves of. The double standards, the two-tier politics, the two-tier justice, the two-tier police system that we have in this country. What I mean by that is that white people and their allies, BAME allies in this country, are treated far more harshly than people, should we say, from the Muslim community, a lot more harshly. There was a classic case yesterday, this morning that came up, where a senior police officer said to a national broadcaster, Sky, we went and spoke to the community leaders to ask them what kind of policing they wanted. Sorry, and when it comes to the other people, they steam in with batons and shields and helmets and body armor.
Did actually the police come to that incident that went all over the net with the pub? When did the police show up? When you had like a group of Islamic rioters go to the pub where there were children and families inside, and they started throwing stones to the windows, etc. Did the police actually show up to that incident?
No. And the thing I was referring to about the policemen saying, we spoke to the Muslim community to ask them what kind of policing they wanted. That is the reason they didn't turn up at the pub, because the Muslim community requested the police weren't there and did nothing. No, seriously.
Interesting phenomenon. Let's talk about this for a moment. Why is it that we have the two-tier system? I mean, one is obviously because they want to groom. One explanation could be, of course, that they want to groom a new electorate. But I wonder also, and I'm going to theorize here a little bit, if they know there's a fear factor that they know if they would do something against those communities, first of all, the governments would have to admit that they made a mistake, right? That's number one. And the second part is then if they did something and things would totally spiral out of control, that would be the end of the current political system, wouldn't it? So would that have something to do with even more so than the electorate? Because I think there is this real big psychological fear factor. When you have someone in the family that terrorizes the family, that person usually gets preferential treatment out of fear the person does something. What if the same applies to countries?
Yeah, well, the squeaky wheel gets the oil, doesn't it? But yeah, I think you probably hit the nail right on the head there. I think the police forces in this country, in Muslim-rich immigrant areas, are terrified of the Muslim mobs that live there. They don't have our, they don't have our mentality that we have a rule of law. If somebody hits you, you go to the police and you make a complaint, and then they go to court, and there's this process of justice that we have in the West. They don't believe in that. They just believe in street justice, mob rule, and and anybody else who wants to what's the word I'm looking for? It is a sort of bullying gangster type culture that these people have. As I say, in Birmingham, as I mentioned, that they ask permission from the Muslim elders in the community what they can do. So the same happens in West Yorkshire as well, which is northern England. And this is one of the reasons why people estimate that something like 500,000 white girls were raped. Well, that's my one. Sarah Champion, the lady I referred to, the Member of Parliament for Rotherham, she reckons 1 million, by these nearer 500,000 girls were raped over a period of 30 years. Simply because the police did nothing, the police were scared to do nothing, and same with the social services, and same with the councils. Something like 80% of Muslims vote for the Labour Party, and they were votes they didn't want to lose, and they were quite prepared to throw the girls aged between 10 and 15 under the bus for the sake of getting a vote and having a quiet life where they live.
Now, what is it actually that the British people want? Could you sum that up?
Yeah, less immigration. Basically, less immigration.
And you said that was about 90, and you said that was about 90%, right? But even if we have less immigration, let's think this through here for a moment. So if we have less immigration, you still have the ones that are there. So what would a society look like if we change this to less immigration at this point? And how would we know that those changes were somehow effective?
Sure. Right. Okay. It's a complicated question to answer. If you go to, I don't know whether you know, but Britain is now a ethnic majority city now. Only 38% of people in London are white. 62%. 62% are of third world BAME people of colour background. That's out of a population of about 10 million people as well. People have seen over the last 27 years how the face of Britain has changed, and they want it to stop. And some people want it to be reversed as well. How we're going to do it, I don't know. I think the Reform Party, which is they picked up 5 MPs in the general election, they want a one in, one out policy whereby if you let an immigrant in, one has to leave. How things might pan out in the future, I don't know. But certainly something needs to be done, or the civil unrest in this country will just get worse and worse and worse.
Prime Minister right now, Starmer, he's a new PM. He was voted for by only 33% of the population. His popularity, according to YouGov UK, as of today is 22%. He's disliked by 60%. Now, obviously, his term will be clearly defined by how he handles this challenge. Do you think he can actually last his term?
So somebody I know has a £100 bet on that he'll be gone by Christmas. There's 2 ways. Well, if you look, start from the beginning. He's got a massive majority, 167. So as a party, the Labour Party is safe. I should imagine what the biggest threat is going to be is if people look at his unpopularity and use it as a sort of club to metaphorically belt him over the head with. Use it as leverage to get him to move on and replace him with a new prime minister. It's the deputy prime minister Angela Rayner has already speculated she's after his job, and good luck. She'll be even worse than Keir Starmer. He's badged it up, but she's going to be absolutely awful by the looks of things. So well, I think the country would have to descend into anarchy and chaos before the Labour Party sort of maybe called an early general election. I don't necessarily foresee that coming, but it's certainly a possibility we have to entertain. But personally speaking, I can't wait for this Labour government to go. They've been absolutely awful, and I detest them, with all my heart at the moment.
Why? So I spoke to a lot of people, and a lot of people said they were afraid to speak out at the moment. What is it in the West, particularly in England right now? Why are people so afraid of speaking truth to themselves, truth to how they see things. Why has this become such an issue?
Okay, number of different reasons. Lose their job. Will you speak to people involved in the political field, or sort of just the man or woman in the street?
No, I was speaking to people in the field. I was speaking even to politicians, actually. I was speaking even to
Go
politicians from a different demographic background, and they too were afraid for other reasons. But the point is, everyone is afraid for
Yeah,
different reasons of speaking what they call truth.
sure. Okay. Well, if you're a politician, you'll be jumped on by the media and the blob and the swamp. But how dare you say that? Oh, I explained to you about Nigel Farage having to defend himself. He's been accused of starting the riots off by himself. There's a group thing that what you have in this country is what Professor Matthew Goodwin is professor of politics. It's basically what you have. You have sort of the liberal elite, which is about 15% of the population. Then you have the 85% of the population, the sensible people like me and you. And once you have an opinion outside of their groupthink, you're immediately pounced upon and attacked. The man in the street will be afraid of losing their job. Some will be afraid of being attacked on social media. Some would worry about being physically attacked. Let me give an example. I sent out a tweet. I'm pro-Israel, and I sent out a tweet which basically said, "F Palestine, F Hamas, F Islam," and I'm currently under police investigation for it. And people last year were prosecuted for their social media posts in Britain. We don't have the First Amendment. We have an implied First Amendment, but it's not very effective at the moment. There's also the thing of bringing in blasphemy laws as well, effectively blasphemy laws. So yeah, it's intimidation and harassment, or even worse, from the political establishment and its allies in the mainstream media.
Well, actually, yeah, you did see a lot of the cowardlessness also during COVID. I mean, you saw that people were just following protocol, and not one of the very few were actually questioning what was going on, which really is a sign of bankruptcy of the Western
Sure,
nation's mind, so
sure,
to speak, because we're
sure.
not looking at these things. Another question here, because the normal go-to is always going to the far right. Everything that is counter government is far right. I want to spin off another theory that I have on that, which is that because Europeans are so susceptible to anything from the far right, because we all carry to some degree the baggage from our parents and grandparents, etc. So anytime somebody hears, oh, there is danger from the far right, people stop even looking or going or questioning anything that's said in that direction. Do you think that governments, particularly as well as mainstream media, blatantly use this intentionally as a psychological thing to
Yeah,
make sure no one can question those
yeah,
things, because
yeah.
they all emotionalize the baggage we all internally have?
Sure, absolutely, yeah. No, far right and racist, are smears in this country. They're basically saying, "Shut up. We don't want to talk about your concerns." This is the reason the British people are so angry, is that they've been told to shut up and called racist. The other one is gammon, from basically a pink ham. Somebody white gets angry, they become pink. So the sort of abusive word is gammon. There's also obviously the xenophobia, little Englander. Any sort of dehumanization of tools they can use to dehumanize people, because they have worries about mass immigration, is used day in, day out. It's getting round to the stage now whereby being a cool right wing and racist has lost its ability to hurt. Most British people are not intrinsically racist. The last person I met outside my house yesterday was a black Ugandan who I'm trying to help, with getting back our children from the social services. You know, a week ago, I was with an ex-Muslim friend of mine. She comes from Afghanistan. You know, and most British people have black people of color as friends. You know,
Now, looking at what is today, what are you expecting? Is this calming down at some point, or is this kind of firing further up that conflict that we're having right now?
Well, there's third. Well, you said it's a different figure to me, but it's 38, at least 38 new demonstrations, like or 100. I don't know, but it sounds to me things are actually getting worse and worse and worse. And also, as well, the left and Antifa are mobilising at the moment. So it should be very interesting times ahead for for us in this country. I think it will peter out. But I'm sure we're not far from the next terrorist outrage. I'm sure we're not far from the next migrant outrage whether it's terrorism, whether it's a stabbing, or whether it's a sexual assault. Don't know is the answer. But I'm sure it's like a forest fire. You think you put them all out, then it's all reignites at reignites in a different place. But yeah, I certainly will sum up by saying people in this country are very, very angry, and the fact that the Labour government hasn't even acknowledged our concerns, let alone do anything about it. Sir Keir Starmer is digging himself a deeper and deeper hole.
I'm wondering if this is because they are overwhelmed, whether they are incompetent, or whether they simply think that they are so overwhelmed, the better is to ignore the problem because they can't deal with it. What do you think?
Um, because they're politically correct socialists, and anything that's that stinks, or smells of something that is right wing, is completely anathema to them. To agree with somebody from the far right or somebody from the right on immigration would seem to be heresy to them. If you want the conspiracy theory, Keir Starmer said he preferred Davos to Parliament. So that's a conspiracy theory. That he's a globalist and cares nothing about Britain, and he's more interested in his global pals in Davos and maybe Washington and other places in the world. But yeah, I know it's. For example, if I post something about a grooming gang, grooming gang is a euphemism. It is women it is girls, who are typically 13, 14 years of age, who are plied with drugs and alcohol, and they are gang raped by mainly Muslim men. And you talk, often it will be a newspaper article, so you put the URL in your tweet, you summarize what's going on here, Abdul Mohamed's been jailed for 8 years, and someone write down racist, for publishing, from a national broadsheet newspaper. And I actually say to these people, are you really telling me, it is worse to be racist than the rape of a 13-year-old girl, or being far right or right wing is worse than the rape of a 13-year-old girl? I can give you horrendous stories of how these people were abused. It wasn't only the fact they were having sex, but without their permission, without their consent. They were physically abused with bottles and things like that as well. It's horrible, some of the stuff I've had to listen to, and they thought some did it because they were just naturally psychopathic, evil people. Some were motivated by religion as well. Their Islamic religion to do that.
But I'm actually at this point, when you look at the push from left and right everywhere and right and left, so we already are in a religious war, not just with the actual religions or faith, but left and right also are in a way religions.
Sure. Yeah. Sorry, you froze at the wrong time there. Can you say the question again, please?
So I said, when you look at what's going on, the left waging war against what they call the right, and the right defending itself for what's coming to the left, we already are in a type of religious war, not just in terms of churches and faiths or dogmatic religions, but
Sure.
also ideologies or religions
Yeah,
too.
sure. Yeah, ideological war. As I say, the major parties have sort of coalesced around the centre, and it's basically just sort of supporters either side of them that are throwing the metaphorical grenades at each other. But yeah, this is the main problem the left has is if you look sort of post Second World War, 1945 to 1989, there was this great ideological battle about which was the best economic system. Is it socialism? Is it capitalism? And when the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, it was fairly obvious that the capitalist West German system was far superior to that in the East German one. In fact, they were on average 3.5 times better off. And immediately the socialists lost the argument on economics. So because they can control the economy, they've now moved on to what's been described as the Marxists walking through the institutions. They've captured things like our civil service. They've captured charities, and we call it NGOs, non-governmental organisations. They've turned up in human resources, HR, in blue chip companies, that kind of thing. And it's all pervasive, in the way that we have to deal with things on a day-to-day basis. The way, for example, that they want to subvert and suppress Britain's history and just talk about when we were doing slaves and when we're taking slaves from West Africa to the West Indies and America. But they never want to talk about the fact that we were the first major country in the world to actually do something about it and stop it. And we spent literally billions of dollars in today's money, in the 19th century, trying to stop the slave trade, and also as well, pressurize and force other countries to do the same. I think it was 1863 we blockaded Brazil. The Royal Navy went over to Brazil, and I think it was in Rio de Janeiro, and we said, look, if you don't stop slavery, we'll flatten the city. And the Brazilians were forced to end slavery around that time. By the way, one of the great footnotes of history, which most Americans don't know, is Britain stopped the transportation of slaves in 1807, and we stopped the ownership of slaves in 1833. But in 1808, America actually banned the shipment of slaves from Africa to America as well. So obviously, slavery in America wasn't blended until 1865, of course. But so the denigration of our culture and our history is one of the things that also sticks in the throat in this country as well.
Yeah, totally. So, is there any way you think of de-escalate? The last question: is there any way of de-escalating the situation going forward?
Some people. For a change, the Labour government showed a bit of get your finger out and get things done. They've actually set up 24-hour courts since the right start. They've set up 24-hour courts and been having people on trial. And within 3 days, people have been sentenced to sentences between 2 months and 3 years. A guy got 3 years today for presumably for throwing stuff at the police and assaulting police and things like that. Remarkably quick. I think that'll be a sobering up for a lot of people. But people will probably just end up putting their masks on, and being surreptitious about it. And apparently they've arrested 400 people so far, from what I can work out. And you're probably looking at least 300 people going to jail.
It's a clash of the World Economic Forum's push to destabilize Europe, and it's coming to the forefront. And unfortunately, it seems to unfold right now. Now, people have to stand up for their lives and the safety of their children. And this is no longer a question of left and right, Democrat or Republican, conservative or liberal, traditional or progressive, or as in England, Labour or Tory. This is a question of human or transhuman, spiritual beings in a physical body, or a robot society that's disconnected with its roots and its soul. Governments, left and right, have refused for years to look at the issues at hand, and now the chicken apparently come home to roost. There are Stalin-like government clampdown styles reported. Now, setting fire on immigrant hotels with people in it, of course, isn't the answer either. Migration has causes, and we need to look at the causes to find a solution, not murder each other. I know people say this is easy for us here in the United States to say, you know, all about this migration, although we have our own issues here at the border. But actually, it's not that easy for me. See, my parents provided a neighboring empty building right next to our home to house migrants. For 10 years, we sheltered between 100 to 120 migrants from all around the world. To do that, when we started off with that, our family was harassed. We received death threats almost daily. We had dead animals on our cars or in front of our door that were put there by locals that were against having migrants in town. We were threatened that our building would be burned down. After a while, it calmed down. But then we got to see also the other side. Out of the 100 migrants, most of them were peaceful most of the time. About 2 handfuls, though, were always troublemakers. One tried to strangle my mother after she asked them to turn down the music so it wouldn't disturb the neighbors, and neighbors would complain, and we couldn't protect the migrants at that point. There was rape, drugs, prostitution that these handful of troublemakers and gangs had brought with them. So much drugs, in fact, that we informed the German police and were told to not look and stay literally away from the waste bin where the daily drop-off was, because apparently we would be endangered if we even looked. German police was afraid of going in. Now that was years ago. When we ended the sheltering, the building, our home, was completely destroyed. It was inhabitable. So I do understand. I understand the Europeans who say we need controlled immigration and address the causes. And I understand the migrants for having to flee uninhabitable environments. I don't understand economic refugees and those who come to get government handout money. And many do that for that very reason. So we have to find a solution to the migration problem, one way or another. Political leaders have to start standing up. And most above all, we have to change the root causes, namely, ending exploiting third world countries, ending having wars in those countries or in other countries, so people are forced to leave, ending bankrupting entire nations by making them dependent on World Bank loans and other financial handouts. It's a start. So let's discuss the existential questions and the liberty we all seek.